program is produced using the resources of Public Media Network in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Learn more at publicmedianet.org.
Hello, welcome to Connecting Communities, a podcast about the environment and people who are doing good things to help out the community of Kalamazoo. I will be your host today, David Bernack, and my co-host today is Joe Byers.
Hello, glad to be here.
And we have a very special guest. I don't want to to show favorites, but this is a guest I've wanted to have on the show for about 2 years. We have Sister Ginny from the Congregation of St. Joseph.
Hi there, welcome.
All right, so we have so much to cover. This is going to be a great one. Sister Ginny, do you want to just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
I'm a sister of St. Joseph, and I've been here in Kalamazoo 57 years tomorrow, and I taught at Nazareth College. I taught at Western Michigan University. I was also an administrator at Borges Hospital for 14 years. So I've had a little variety of what I've done.
A little bit of everything. So what did you teach at Nazareth and at Western?
Well, I started out with teaching the environmental programs there. I taught the very first class dealing with environment. So that was a starter for us.
Do you know about when that was?
1978.
No, not about. You know exactly when.
August. In fact, we started the week. I entered 57 years ago tomorrow, and 2 days or 3 days later, I started teaching at Nazareth College.
So that had to be one of the earlier environmental programs in 1978.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Uh-huh.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
So why did you do that?
Well, because that's what I was trained to do. I mean, I guess I have to say earlier, in terms of my degrees from Michigan State University, the first one was in botany and plant pathology, but the second one was the College of Agriculture, Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, because there were no environmental studies or education programs existing. So that's where I got my degree, Fisheries and Wildlife.
I got it. How many women were in your classes?
Not many.
Yeah. You were a real trailbreaker.
It was an interesting time. In fact, at the time, my degree, my PhD research, was in the hopes that the state of Michigan was beginning to develop performance objectives in all of its subject areas. And so my dissertation involved development of performance objectives for the third grade students. And then by the time I finished, thank heavens, I finished my PhD by the time the state decided they weren't going to deal with this anymore. So meantime, I already had my study done, my research printed, and my degree done. But I was very disappointed that they, not so much just in my area, but that they didn't deal with the notion of performance objectives as a way of helping education proceed.
Yeah, 78 would have been, in the last years of the Carter presidency, oil shock, inflation. That was a tough time. Yeah, and then, followed by...
Well, the state of Michigan changed its mind, but fortunately, my degree was all done. I mean, if they had changed their mind before I finished publishing and everything, I'd have been up the creek. And not happy.
Yeah.
So that's how I finished half the degree, the PhD. And it's interesting because I lived at the graduate dormitory at Michigan State University. And in those years then, all of a sudden, that dormitory got invaded by nuns from all over because Vatican II had occurred. And these people were now able to go to college for their degrees. And next thing I know, I found myself chauffeuring some of these nuns here and there and so on. And that's how I ended up at Nazareth and entered the Sisters of St. Joseph at Nazareth in 1968.
Joe and I are both Spartans as well.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
So when I entered, as I said, 3 days later, I started teaching at our college for freshman students and so on. And at that time, we were still all girls. It still was an all-girls college. I say that because as I began work, but probably after the first year, 75, on our grounds, I found that we had a back entrance to the campus, and then we were at the top of a marsh, and people would drive in off of Nazareth Road and dump garbage down into the marsh.
Oh, that's terrible.
So the first thing I did then was work on getting a grant from a number of local agencies, and I way back, like there's some old Super 8 videos back at our archives in Cleveland now that show us with taking pictures of the equipment pulling out all the trash that they could, and creating, hopefully, a steeper hill so that the cars couldn't come and dump over it, okay? Fine. Well, then we had this bare, huge hill, and it took 1,000 woman hours of labor, women, because we were all women's college, planting that hill to cover it, and so you'd plant your seeds in and you'd cover it with straw. Well, one afternoon, when we were out there doing that, the whole hill started to move.
Oh, no.
What it turned out was that some snapping turtles had come and laid their eggs under the straw, and hundreds of baby snapping turtles marched down into the marsh. That was our first great big celebration.
That is a celebration.
Yeah.
So it took 1,000 hours of woman hours labors to finish that hill.
But you did something that made a difference for a long time.
We did it. Well, it's changed a little bit now because they had to modify the hill somewhat now that they have a new building back there, which is our new home. But so that was the first big project. And the other piece then was to create some other trails. And initially, some people who lived across the way from us on the east side of the property, it wasn't our property, but their property, were willing to let us go across to use their property. And we developed a very interesting bridge. It was a special kind of bridge, like a Japanese type bridge. We went halfway across and the other halfway across so that the evil spirit couldn't cross the trail. Okay. Well, that worked real good until it had metal siding on it and so on, Well, some folks who decided they wanted to use motorcycles and come across decided that they were going to reconstruct it for us. So they fixed the siding off and so on, Anyway, that lasted just a little bit with that special Bow in the Clouds special trail. But and then the nice people that let us use their property moved, and some other people came in with dogs. And anyway, we had to recreate trails because when we first did that, we only needed one bridge across one part of the creek because the two parts of the creek there that merge into one on the east side of us. So now we had to figure out how to put bridges on two parts of the trail. And so we worked on creating bridges and so on for that. And I remember when I first showed the property before the show of the property to the Land Conservancy people, I was trying to lay out where am I going to put the trails. So you're heading off and you watch how the deer cross, and you say, oh, look at this deer path. Well, the deer have the advantage of spreading out their weight on 4 legs, and I only had 2. And I found that at one point I managed to get my legs right down. I fell through the marsh, just one leg. I mean, I was totally immersed. And fortunately, somebody had to pull me out, and obviously I had to change where I moved the trail based on that. But I had to work it through, and I could say I really learned it the hard way of where you could put a trail that people could walk through without falling through.
But it makes sense to follow the animal trails.
That's what I thought, except that they distribute their weight differently.
Yeah.
So, not that I'm all that heavy. I'm not all that heavy. I was even thinner then. The picture I shared with you, you can see how thin I am at that time. But anyway, so we created gradually a number of paths and trails and bridges with the helps of lots of Eagle Scouts over the years and so on.
So was it always a public preserve then?
No, not well. It was
So
something.
the trails were for
People who wanted to use it
that were at the college.
for the college, and anybody else who wanted to use it at that time. It was not publicized as an opening for people to use or whatever. I was just kind of trying to create a pathway and so on. So it turned out to be a lot more than I thought. But I'm grateful for the 8 Eagle Scout troops who work with me over the years in terms of developing things and so on. And initially, I would use kind of a weed whacker by hand, but that was a big job I mean, realize there's a lot of acres there.
Mm-hmm.
I forget the actual number of acres, but it's not a little place.
So, just for context, so people who might not be familiar with it, we're talking about Bow in the Clouds, which is right behind the campus of the
Sisters-
congregation.
Yes,
Sisters-
that's right. And it was part of our campus.
Yeah, it originally was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the corner of Nazareth and Gull. Not Nazareth and Gull, thereabouts, right?
Well, Gull and Nazareth, yeah.
Okay.
But it's in the back of that property.
And in addition to being a preserve area, a lot of people don't know that's a city wellhead.
Yes.
So all that hard work that you've done and others is filtering the water that everybody in Kalamazoo drinks.
There was also another issue in that at the time, they would just build some new businesses along Gull Road, but they didn't have sanitary sewers. Now, there was sanitary sewers up in Parchment, up by Spring Valley School, and so they actually met with us to take to cut across a piece of our land to get to Nazareth Road and be able to go down Gull Road to put sanitary sewers in. And they promised me that they would be careful. Well, on that further north side of the property, there's some springs that just came up out of the water. And I was so concerned about losing those springs, the natural springs.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, some of them were buried. Whatever. You couldn't see them anymore. But somewhere along the line in the process, some vandals came in to where the city had done the work on creating the water entrance across, and they destroyed everything. They pulled all kinds of stuff up, and there was flooding all over the place. And I really cried. I cried so hard. But you know what happened? It happened to be a time when it rained for several days afterwards, and it turns out that we had a beautiful clearing of what could have been contaminating area. So there was no contamination left and the city came in to, reconstruct what had to be done in that sewage way, the pipings they need and so on along that line. But I could not believe, how much it rained the next couple of days. It was just like heaven was sending down what it needed to do to clear out that pollution. It was just wonderful. Some other interesting things happened, too, at one point. At one point, part of our trails along one part of the pathway started flooding. I'm like, gee, what's going on, Is it really, Well, it turns out that at the very end of the trail properties, at the very end of our property, some beavers decided where the two parts of the trails the streams came together to build a dam. A big, deep dam. And that was flooding the rest of the property. So, of course, I had to get some more grant money, and I had to get approval from the DNR because the beavers didn't need property to build their dam. I needed something to do about the beavers. And I wasn't going to kill them and leave them. That's what I was told to do. So I did some research, and I found that in North Carolina, there was a way that they could deal with this kind of problem. And so some men who volunteered with me from a company, a hunting company that was part of, and one of them was an engineer from Grand Rapids, came down. I had to pay the equipment, the pipes and stuff that they were going to bring down there to do it, to drain part of that, just enough, so that the beaver had enough for what they wanted to do, and we had the trail for what we wanted to do. And, of course, when the beaver finished doing what it could do with the wooded area around us, it moved on. But it was quite an effort to get another grant, to get the money, to deal with, and to go work with DNR, to get the written approval to work with this project, because it was dealing with something that was not permitted otherwise.
But that's worth just taking a minute to think about, because that's such a beautiful story that instead of going the quick, easy route and just going out there and shooting the beaver and, transforming the land back into what people want, you found a way to live with the beaver. They got what they wanted, you got what you wanted, and it just shows that we can coexist with nature.
I wasn't about to destroy the beaver,
Yeah.
but I needed the place to unflooding to stop the flooding too. So, but it was interesting to watch that whole experience, and interesting the first night that the guys came down to work on it, they were having such a good time playing around in the water. I was almost don't get hurt because I didn't want to have to deal with any problems of any injuries in the property. But I didn't stand down and watching the guys playing in the water anymore because they were having a good time.
How did the sisters acquire Bow in the Clouds, or that property?
We owned that property for a long time. At
Okay,
one time, apparently, they used to even have cattle that went down into there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what they told me. There's a section back there where some of the trees along the edge of it had fencing, and actually the fencing had grown through the trees because the trees had been there for so long and so on. But long before I had anything to do with it.
Yeah, there's some areas I can think of now that you say. I can think of seeing some fencing in a few areas out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's way before my time that they did that, but they had some cattle down there and so on at one point.
And today, the sisters no longer own that property.
No, we turned that over in, you have the date on there, 2020.
You have it. I think you.
No, on a piece of paper.
I think you took the piece of paper back.
So I.
So for those of us who aren't, those of you who are listening rather
probably
than
in my
watching,
2012, I think.
Yeah, I
Sister
think
Ginny
that's what
brought
you
in
said.
some
2012,
photographs
yeah.
and some notes
Right,
for
right,
us to
right,
look at.
yeah. We turned it over to Land Conservancy at that point in time, But even then, that was an interesting experience to me to walk with them, the Land Conservancy people, because as I said, I started out when I was maintaining the trails with a hand scythe, and then I managed to get an electric machine. Electric machine is pretty heavy for a little gal like me. And I did that I had a lot of volunteers too over the years, but somehow the volunteers always couldn't be there when the trail needed help.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was glad the Land Conservancy could take it over, and I'm delighted with them and what they've done with it, and I'm just really excited about what's there. I mean, I started it, I created it, I worked with it, but they just took it over and done wonderful stuff with it. So I thank them.
And they're still using volunteer labor, but also staff labor, because I know my wife and I probably volunteer a couple times a year to help them out, but they do work all year round to maintain and improve that property.
And they made it accessible to people on the east side of Kalamazoo. And there's a lot of poor people on our side of Kalamazoo.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that they really use it a lot. In fact, I know there was some recent damage to the equipment that the Land Conservancy had. And in talking with people from the Land Conservancy, they really think that some of the people who damaged it thought that the equipment in there was going to do some damage to the trails in the entrance, and didn't understand what was going to happen with it. So, I watched people from the East Side schools come through, and I know that's especially kids that are not getting much contact with the natural world, whatever. So I'm just very grateful that it's there and they're able to use it, and they've done a good job of using it over time.
Yeah, one of the days we usually help out, they have an in-service volunteer day on Martin Luther King Jr. Day every year, and it's usually terrible weather. It's cold and icy that time of year. There was one year we were out there, and I think everybody fell down at least a couple times. It was just a sheet of ice. But there's always 50 to 100 people out there.
They do a good job.
Volunteer, just people just love that space. It brings people together to do things.
Yes, they can go for a nice walk
Yeah.
and enjoy things in that space. It's kind of interesting, too. We used to work with the Spring Valley School, which is on the north side of that. It's, there are different people there now, but when those youngsters were there, working with whatever they could do, was just moving little stuff up and down the hill kind of a thing, whatever. But they also enjoyed working with the trail and so on, so it was good. And the other things I'm trying to think about with it were some challenges that came up. I've got some pictures, slides now stored in our archives, but there actually have been some unusual animals that have been found on the trails in the past.
Oh, really?
Little wolf kind of a thing almost.
Huh.
Which was nice to see, and I enjoyed just the sense of the variety of the plants that we have back there. It's just a very rich place.
Yeah,
It's
is.
a very rich place.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I've also helped out there a lot, and it's always fascinating. Even in the dead of winter, in the middle of January, all the birds that you hear.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the chickadees and the nuthatches, and the cardinals. And
One of the things I loved to do was comes March early. Birds haven't returned, but there's about halfway through, there's some trees that just lean over just enough for a little gal like me to climb up a little bit into it and watch for the birds coming through that are in the different times and so on. Yeah.
I've actually seen sandhill crane nesting
Yes.
out there.
Yes. Yes. And we've had some eagles out there.
Oh.
In fact, the Land Conservancy has created some nesting spaces, poles or something like that, for the eagles landing out there. So,
So why did you decide to do this with your life? Just nurture the environment and devote yourself to I think you said ministry of environment, or I forget how you said it.
Earth Ministry or
Yeah.
environmental. Well, I have to give credit to my mentor, who was a Quaker, who taught at Springfield College in Massachusetts. And, that's interesting. Springfield College was a YMCA training center, believe it or not. And there were women there too now by that time, so there was just whatever. But he didn't, it wasn't so much as, he said things, obviously, because he was a botanist, but the way he related to the earth and the earth community was something that, I grew up on Long Island. I thought I was going to be strict botany teacher, a biology teacher in the old-fashioned way with dissecting frogs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I learned a lot more from being with him and watching the value of life, all kinds of life, and trying to make that life available for others. I worked as a volunteer while I was there with a group of women who were, they must have have some kind of, the girls, they probably had some kind of a problem because they were in a confined institution. It happened to be run by a bunch of nuns, and across the street from where we had a college campgrounds. And I was able to get to work with them and get them out into the natural area there and make a difference in seeing what happened to them. I also spent time with my mentor in Maine and looking at what we could do in Maine in the areas that he worked in Vermont. And so I give my credit to Dr. John Brainerd, a Quaker from Springfield College in Massachusetts, and his living in a loving and caring way with Earth, with the planet Earth, and wanting to make it a good home for people and for the natural world. So thank you, John Brainerd.
And you're not alone in caring about the earth amongst the congregation.
Oh, no. There's lots of folks doing all that they can now. I think I was a little early in doing it. And the way I did it was is not as, how shall I say it? It's such a big activity now that other people can take part of. But the little thing I did of trying to take care of that little piece of property and trying to make it a life-giving source for people and for our planet was very different. I mean, there's so much more they can do now because there's so much more interest, there's so much brighter scope of activities and so on. But my focus was on that little piece of land and what I could do with it.
And how have you seen that piece of land change?
Well, I have seen it with the Land Conservancy, what they've done. You know, they've opened a big area where you can look out over and down into the marsh that wasn't there when I was there. And they've done a lot coming from right off of the Nazareth Road part. I did a lot from our side.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I used to do cross-country ski trails through there. Oh, I guess I'm skipping one of the piece because at one point I got a grant and we developed a pond. We had a pond put up there. And my idea was that pond would be a place where we could have elementary school students around this pond with a peninsula that went out into it and so on to learn about stuff. And that never did happen. The folks across the street from us on Nazareth Road Elementary School was interested for a while, but that changed and so on. But anyway, it's all grown up. But it turns out that the water in that pond is a natural spring, and it doesn't freeze. That pond does not freeze. And so when you go down there in the wintertime, it's still open, and it's just all kinds of things happening in that pond in the wintertime because it's not frozen.
Right.
And the dew from it creates a most magnificent icy picture.
Oh, I bet. There's
Around.
just this steam rising
Steam
up off of it
coming
in the
up from it
wintertime,
around,
yeah.
and so on. So it's a very beautiful place. And I used to take people from the fitness center with cross-country skis out back that way just to be at the point of that pond and to enjoy it that way. It just was magnificent. So sneak back there. It's on the side of the campus, our campus. From the trails, I don't think the Land Conservancy does much trails about that part of it, but it's the upper part on that side of the property. But it's a beautiful place in the winter.
Yeah, I'll have to look for that. I don't know that I've ever noticed that pond. We haven't been out there in a few. I don't think we've been out there since spring, but it's a place we'd like to take our dog for a walk. Yeah.
You wouldn't see the pond if you just take the trails across the marsh and stuff. You have to walk further into the wooded area on the Nazareth side of the property. Go do that in the winter.
Yeah.
When you can see the ice.
Wow.
Or the no ice.
Or the no ice, the beautiful part anyway, yeah. So, it's amazing to me that the little things that show up like that. I wanted to create a fishing pond or a place for students, elementary school students, but it never turned out, and it all grew up around there, and nature made it something extra.
That's something that when you spend a lot of time with a natural space, you start to look more closely. Instead of just seeing a pond with, some birds on it, you start to see what kind of birds they are and how the birds are interacting and the plants, and you start looking more closely.
The geese from Averill Lake winter on our little pond. They don't go, they just stay by.
Well, there's probably plenty of food, and you've got open water. You might as well stay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Seems like the smart choice instead of flying.
Why go all that distance, right?
So, what are some of the things out there that you think have been like your biggest wins
Well, actually, that pond is one of them. Is one of them, and I think that each of the little bridges that we put in have an opportunity. If you stop, and sit. Now, long before I got to be involved in working this, the sisters who were here before I came, the ones who were younger ones before I entered, and were long since gone as teachers all over the state when I did enter, and they were all, of course, wearing traditional habits at the time, and so. But they used to come and out back there, and at least to that first bridge crossing, on that one side of it, they used to go there and just have enjoy the natural place, and they called it the land of heaven or something like that. You know, that they enjoyed being at. But they didn't change it in any way, and I didn't develop any of that part that they worked on, but they did. The Land Conservancy people fostered that kind of a contact around, so that's there, and people stop and look, and you can watch turtles show up from that spot.
And that reminded me of something you told us when you first came in. The name of the place, Bow in the Clouds. What's that? How did it emerge?
Well, when I first came here, one of the first things they did, believe it or not, was send me, my first year teaching at the college, to a conference in Philadelphia, I think it was, of the American College Association, or whatever. But they sent me on a bus. Interesting, okay? We weren't going to spend any money. Not only did they send me on a bus, they sent me to stay in a hotel, which was really only $30 a night, kind of a thing, and there was no toilet in the room. You had to go down the hole and around the bend. They really were very tight about what they were going to do with this budget, right? And so on the bus, I'm sitting there, and on the way down, I sat next to a lady who was crocheting this really long, thin, white thing, and I said, "Well, what are you doing?" Well, she was making bandages for lepers. So she gave me the instructions, and when I got there, I got off the Woolworths or whatever it was and bought the stuff and started crocheting. Long, 500 miles anyway. Long story, as it turns out, by the time I finished it, I found out the Leprosy Society didn't need them anymore. They were using new materials. But anyway, that was the start. And on the way back on that bus, on the ride, we encountered a section of that road that had two beautiful rainbows. And they just really caught my attention. And so much so that when I came home, I opened my Bible and went down to Genesis. And good Lord, Genesis 9. I set my bow in the clouds as a sign of covenant between me and the earth. And I thought, that's a message that people need to hear. Now, I don't know if all the people who use it hear it or see it, but I think it's there because that's an important message. It's a sense of our important relationship with the entire creation that came. We were given that in Genesis 9. That's who we're supposed to be. And so that's why I named the area Bow in the Clouds. So I hope some people get curious about what the heck it is and look it up and try to find something out about it. But that was the strong motivation for me in, I think, of doing the whole project. To say loudly as I could say, in our world, in our place today, set my bow in the clouds as a sign of covenant between me and the earth, between our responsibility and our Creator, in relation to the Creator. So that's how I got the name.
We would be in such a better place in the world if people felt that there was a connection between us and all life rather than all life just existing for our use.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, that's how it came about in Genesis 9. Look it up.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure that gets recorded, and remembered, because I don't know that I've seen that before as the explanation for the name.
Mm-hmm.
That's important.
Yeah. It was a real challenge. It was a message. It was a job.
Yeah.
It said, do it. And I think some people way, way back did it too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the first one ever to try to do it, that's for sure. And I hope I'm not the last.
So at the congregation, do you have like a group of sisters that talk about environmental issues and work together?
Well, I'm sure there are some, but now you have to recognize that the congregation now has people in many states and in many different situations, okay? And a lot of us are not youngsters anymore. At our place at Nazareth, I'm going to be 81 in October, and I'm one of the youngsters. There are a few, just a couple younger than me. But we also have a lot of lay people living with us now, too. Mm-hmm. And I say it that way because many of us, including myself now, don't have the energies to do a lot of what we would have done before.
Mm-hmm.
I think many, we don't have a lot, totally in the congregation, we have a lot of older sisters. But we do have a number of sisters who are young enough and have an energy enough to be involved in where they are. So, for example, our sisters who are in West Virginia are struggling with the whole issue that they have there of the way the soil, the coal in the soil, and what they're dealing with. And so they have to deal with where they're dealing with it.
Yeah.
So, but I'm excited to know that a lot of them are working at it. And a lot of them are recognizing our spiritual relationship and our theology relating to creation in a way that we didn't talk about it very often before. So I'm pleased about what's happening with those who can do it are doing it.
And that's great that you have like a multi-state, group, because, congregations are all shrinking.
Yes. Yes.
Finding those supports is important.
Yes. And we're all Sisters of St. Joseph, which means that all of us had our founding, if you will, from the same 1660 congregation of St. Joseph in France, in Le Puy, France. And we just have spread out in the United States over the years.
And what are things that are happening today that that you're involved in, or other people at the congregation are involved in, that are along similar lines to what you've been doing?
I don't know so much on the environmental stuff. I think we're doing a lot with the theology.
Okay.
And I'm trying to help people recognize the significance of our relationships to the planet Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And but they're also dealing with the particular problems of the place that they're at.
Yeah.
So the folks in West Virginia have to deal with all that stuff that's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
The folks in New Orleans have a different to deal with,
Yeah.
or in Wichita, Kansas. So I think that's important. They're recognizing where they are at, and what could they do where they are at, and what can we do legislatively.
Yeah.
That's another whole issue. Like my comment was that because I'm not able physically to do as much as I would like to do, I spend a lot of time with email advocacy for all kinds of legislative actions and support, so that I can support that way. Those folks are able to do what I'm not able to do anymore physically.
But one of the things that I think just deserves some attention is you spent a lifetime with this piece of property and really made a difference. And we were talking a little bit at the beginning, and this is the kind of thing that I think is so important. and you're talking about people in West Virginia dealing with what they can handle in West Virginia, people in Kansas, what they can do there, people in New Orleans, what they can do there. Being, taking that local approach and solving local problems is something that's possible. We have to all work together towards climate change. We have to all work together towards plastic pollution. We have to all work together towards all these big global issues. But if we really concentrate our efforts locally, we can make a visible difference that will be a legacy that will change a space.
When you say that, it makes me kind of catch my breath because, we still have a 270-acre farm in Comstock, Michigan. And there's some possibilities that I dream of and I pray about and hope that we could do there. Comstock is an area that has some poor people, and so there's some ways that I think that our farm activity could help there. But also, I look at, the idea of taking about 30 cattle on a part of the land and sequestering that land and allowing them to help us deal with the CO2 sequestration of that. About the care of that wooded area that we have, that forestry area, to make sure it's, it needs to be cared for in a way that continues to help heal. But there's some things that have to be done. I mean, I'd love to work, the Comstock Community Center, the person who's the head of that, Mary Augustus, is one of our Nazareth students. And I wish I had the energy left to work with Mary to make a difference with her. I don't. So I just keep waiting for who's going to be there to do it, and encouraging people that I can. We have some good volunteers that help and do what they can.
And that's a good thing to raise too, because I think that agriculture is one of the biggest areas where we could really transform our relationship with the planet. Especially in the United States, so much of our agriculture is, it's this chemical intensive monocrop heavy machinery, and it's mostly, if it's not the majority, I think in some crops it definitely is. For soybeans, I know it is. We're producing biofuels. We're not producing food. If we could produce food, we could use a lot less land in a lot more sensitive way.
Yes.
Create more jobs for people, put people back on the land. There's so much benefit, and we could restore the health of the soil.
Absolutely.
So there's so much we could do in agriculture.
I think also I was raised on my grandparents' blueberry farm. We always had huge gardens. I think that's an important skill for kids to learn. Not only growing your own food, but to learn about nature and learn how to identify trees and different flowers. And I think those things are just as important as
One of the things that's happening in Comstock is across the street from us, on land that used to be our property, is now being converted to a new Comstock school. But the group people related to that school are going to be students that are going to be dealing with some. We've met with some people from there to help them look at how could they use our land to do some of the education around that with that group of students. I guess it's a particular group of students. I'm not sure that what this category will be, but they're just building the property across the way from us, and they'll be right there. And they talk with us about coming across the street to look at our land and what they could be doing and learning from it. So I'm hoping that goes well.
There's a big development project down in Vicksburg, Paper City complex. They're turning an old paper mill into a multi-use venue that's going to be it's going to have like a museum and art galleries. It's going to have shops and residences. And
wow.
Yeah, it's a really, really ambitious project. They've been working on it for years. And by all accounts, it's going to be a success. But if they ever get it working the way that they're trying, it's going to be really fantastic. But I bring this up because I was down there helping them a couple of years ago on they were installing like a prairie, and they had the Vicksburg High School students. So they're working with the Vicksburg High School using this complex for learning, like nature learning opportunities.
I'm delighted about this. At least the contact person from the Comstock School has already talked with our people in terms about what they could do and how they can use it. Now, we do have a lot of deer on the property. And so I have someone that does controlled hunting, which does hunting to feed his family and relatives, but he also allows the rest of the hunting to go to meat to be able to be used to people that need it, to distribute it in food pantries and stuff like that, yeah. So, because when you have a lot of deer running around, first of all, you've got to deal with it for the sake of the rest of the crops and stuff like that, but also for the deer too, because they just can't compete enough to
Until we can bring some predators back.
Well, we've got some, unfortunately, but not the right kind, I don't think. Coyotes in particular.
All of what you're telling me, you probably have read Aldo Leopold's work.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, what you're telling me sounds so much, like Leopold and Land Ethic and the Sand County Farm.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, those were part of my good studies.
Have you gotten into the books by the Native American author Robin Kimmerer?
Yes.
Like the serviceberry
she
and,
really touches my heart.
Braiding sweetgrass.
Robin Timmer really touches my heart.
Yeah.
I'd love to get her up here.
So she was just here last year. I saw her at KVCC.
Was she KVCC?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. I love the way I've got the one book that she's got that I written that I have, only one now, but I keep looking at another one to buy. And
Yeah, so I get a free Audible, so I listen to her newest one, the books on tape. So
she's also online sometimes. So if I Google her name and whatever, sometimes she's doing lectures online.
Yeah.
And I get into her lectures online too.
Yeah.
But she's a Potawatomi Indian.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting because we have a particular relationship with the Potawatomi Indians. Chief Pokagon is a Potawatomi chief in the Dewajak area. And at the time when the Potawatomis all of them were being driven off the land and marched across the Mississippi and so on, Chief Pokagon sent a runner to Detroit to talk to the Catholic bishop and gave the Catholic bishop a piece of land in Silver Creek area. And basically, the Pokagon band didn't have the same, were not driven off. They could stay on on the bishop's land in Silver Creek. In fact, a lot of them they're buried in a church that's there. One of our sisters used to minister at Silver Creek in the church. But I know a good friend, Pokagon, who at the time, it was 100 years ago, that they chose to have a rerunning of that event. And at the time, initially, it was supposed to be a lot of runners to go to Detroit. Well, only one showed up. He happened to be employed by a company, Whirlpool, in Benton Harbor.
Yep.
He's the only one. But he did the run to Detroit to memorialize what happened. And on the way back, he had a spiritual experience encountering Chief Pokagon and his wife. And anyway, he ended up feeling committed, and he became a deacon in our church.
Wow.
So he's a friend, and I had him in spiritual direction for a number of years, and so I have a Pokagon friend. and I love what they're doing because they are also using some of their money from the gambling on the property.
Casinos,
yeah. Anyway, to create a problem by their elderly, and they're beginning to have an education place, but they're beginning to relearn the Potawatomi language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Because I mentioned that because the woman you mentioned is a Pokagon, is a Potawatomi.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, some of the native communities are doing really fantastic work.
yeah.
We had a group from Matchibenashuish, the Gun Lake Band, on, it must have been almost 2 years ago. And they're doing really great work with wild rice restoration, with raising and releasing sturgeon. Yeah.
They're Potawatomis too, you know.
Yep. So there's, and there's a lot of really great, just stewarding the land and respecting the land coming from some of the native communities.
And coming from their heritage.
Yeah.
From their background and heritage too. So I'm pleased to see that.
Me too.
And I guess even a lot of that's happening in other parts of the country, when native peoples are beginning to take hold of and save or rework the land the way it should be, allow it to be done. So it's good news.
Yeah, the wild rice restoration is going across, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, with a lot of the native groups is really impressive, really amazing work. And we, as a matter of fact, you were there at that.
Yeah, we just had
at Wild Ones.
Yep, it was a Wild Ones event where they had Roger.
I can't remember his name.
I can't remember his name, but he's one of the big advocates for wild rice in Michigan and has done the legislative, all that kind of stuff, and has been involved for, 35, 40
For a long
years or
time,
something.
yeah.
Wow.
It was a really interesting seminar.
Yeah, the content was really good.
Yeah.
But there's so much good work going on.
That's great.
Yeah, it's so tough though, because there's people who will meet who are like him, like yourself, like the people that Joe works with, Reforest Vine, with Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy, who runs
Tom
Blind
Small
Clouds.
and his
Yeah.
group.
I mean, there's some really amazing people who are pushing in the right direction, but what do you think? How do we get Americans to adopt a culture of respecting the planet?
I think we need to get them out into the ones who come to Bump in the Clouds.
Yeah.
That's the first step. Let them experience something that touches their hearts.
Yeah, you can't become a committed advocate for saving someplace until you love it.
I mean, I grew up on Long Island. It was not, originally it was a potato cart. But you really couldn't say at that point in time that you had a lot of advocacy of anything. It was all kind of very commercial. Lots of houses. Well, of course, remember, much of that potato fields across the street from us growing up was to make homes for soldiers coming back from the war, from World War II.
The original Levittown.
That's the original left. My dad worked there.
Yeah.
I remember.
It was a potato farm.
Potato field across the street from us. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, I mean, it was big difference. When I came here, when I came to Springfield College, I mean, I had come from that, and I thought I was going to be a biology teacher. I was going to dissect frogs. That was the notion. Well, we probably did when I had to at the class in biology, but I never dissected a frog since. Never wanted to either.
Well, I would love to continue talking, but I think we've got a full episode. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to share?
I guess the biggest thing for me is that to encourage more and more people to get out and experience the natural world in many different ways. Because that's where they learn to love it.
Yeah.
So whatever we can do, wherever we can do it. And that's why I'm so glad for the Land Conservancy, because they've got an area not far from pretty, suburban city area, poorly developed, lower income area, that people can get out and experience the natural world. I think that's all we need to do.
And in Michigan, there's no better time to get out and enjoy the natural world than fall, which is here. So
Fall's
this is
coming up.
perfect.
Yeah, sure feels like fall today.
And I'm looking. It's one of my favorite seasons.
Me too. Actually, as I get older, I always liked like spring, May, June, but I think August now is my favorite month.
So get outside, watch the leaves change.
I like September and October.
Birds start to migrate. You get to see some things that you wouldn't see otherwise.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Nice talking with you.
Thank you so
It's
much.
been such a pleasure.
It's
Thank
been
you.
it's a pleasure for me too. Thank you.